was the sound of Nye Bevan, the Labour minister, who is attacking the British and French and Israeli adventure of Suez, and he's speaking, and I can hear him speak. I'm 10 years old, yes, and I can hear him speaking in my ear, and then suddenly John Flower, I remember the man, comes up and he goes, "They've gone in." And I'm 10, remember, so I'm going, "They've gone in." He said, "Yep, the tanks have gone in." Now, of course, as a child, I'm thinking, the tanks have gone into Cairo. And then he says, "Budapest." And I'm going, "Budapest, is that in Egypt?" And I'm trying to put geography and politics together as a 10-year-old does. So this is going on. And of course, this is a crunch moment. Here, with all the virtues of kind of being anti-colonialist, as far as the West is concerned, this group of communists are sitting about, and quite right, and I would join them in that, objecting to this invasion of a sovereign country of Egypt, and so on. And then they've got the problem of how are they going to justify exactly the same thing going on in Europe. And of course, I can see this thing where they're all standing around, absolutely white-faced, trying to cope with it, psychologically, politically. It's all unravelling the events of the previous 25, 30 years of their lives, and moments when they thought they were in the right and so on. As it happens, my dear folks, they didn't resign at that moment. We went to East Germany in 1957, and they resigned after our visit to East Germany. But as I said earlier, I think the thing that changed them, and it does tie in with some of the stuff I'm saying, is that their thinking within education had moved to a point, to be technical about it, the Communist Party had a very reductive attitude, and Marxists around the world, many of them had a very reductive attitude to what they would call working class children in schools, that they imagined that just as the fruits of working class people's labour is taken away from them, they had the idea that they had the culture and language taken away from them. My parents had reached precisely the opposite conclusion, that actually what happens in schools is that we stop working class children from speaking and we stop them from writing, and that actually our job is just to open our ears and to find literature, in their case as English teachers, to find literature, but in my mother's case as a primary school teacher, activities of any kind, like local history, she did an incredible project with the kids at her school where they investigated the local medieval tithe barn and so on, that their job really was in fact precisely the opposite. So in fact, though there's Suez and though there's East Germany, that of far more significance for them was that they realised that this hidebound old Communist Party had reached a point where they couldn't even understand the very people that they were supposedly going to liberate, because they'd imagined that they were without culture, without language, and all the cultural deficit theory stuff that my father later went on to attack Basil Bernstein for, with his supposed theories of elaborated and restricted codes, which my father replied to with a book called Language and Class. So actually that was the shockwave. The shockwave was to realise that they were in an organisation that was totally opposed to what they believed in, which they could see in front of them. My father was teaching Dockers kids off the Old Kent Road. My mother was teaching children in Croxley Green, which was, though a kind of rural suburb, was quite an interesting place with great variety and so on. And they realised this stuff just didn't hold up. And then I think, they thought a lot of things weren't actually holding up. So that's actually the focus. And I can remember this stuff going on, even though I'm only 10 and 11 and 12, I can sort of hear it and feel it going on. And as it happens at this very moment, a group of us are trying to assemble a bibliography of my father's writings. And I suddenly a little memory came back to me that my dad used to write articles for the Communist Party Education Journal. Where do you find that journal, in heaven's name? Lo and behold, there's a place in Manchester that had invited me to come and speak, called the Working Class Movement Library, which is an incredible little library of the annals of the labour movement in Britain, but also other countries. And I said, "Have you got Education Today and Tomorrow from 1945 to 19... They said, "Oh yeah, sure, here it is." And so I sat there leafing over the pages, and up comes the first one, Connie Rosen. Wow, my mum wrote for him as well. Turn over the pages, and there's Harold Rosen, and a couple of them are absolutely appalling. A piece of real terrible Stalinist crap. That's the mild word for it. And then one or two that are just a little bit better. But so there we are. They'll go in the bibliography. And then, as it happens, my brother's, my brother is the archivist for Darwin, Charles Darwin, and he said, and you librarians know about this, and he's an archivist, that you can sort of create a silo, an online silo of documents, and he says, well, let's do that with the old man stuff. So that is our next project, is to just sort of pile up a kind of, there's probably a technical word for it, not a silo, but anyway, of his writings and so on, and my Mars as well, of course, because my mum went on to write lots of things as well. So there we are. And in fact, if those people, so few folks in Britain, in fact, one person did a PhD on the teaching organisation that my dad helped found, there's an arc of thinking going from this quite reductive stuff to something much more emancipated that actually applied to plenty of other people. So it's a little moment there anyway. So yes, thank you for the question. Yeah. Sorry about the long answer. Yeah. Yes.
Do your kids like to write?
Right. Let's go through them. There's quite a lot of them. No, wait a minute. Joe is he's 34. He's making films, and he's writing some film scripts at the moment. So I guess he's a writer and a filmmaker. Eddie was a writer. He had written a play which we put on at Edinburgh just after he died, and he wrote some very funny ballad poems, satirical ballad poems. He was 19 when he died, just before he was 19. I have two stepdaughters, one of whom's just had a baby, and she's not writing very much at the moment. She has a baby who doesn't feed all day one day and then breastfeeds all day the next day. So I got a text saying, I'm feeling quite tired, does this often happen? And so I went through all the children in the family and so which ones it happens to and which ones it didn't, including the 5-year-old who was exactly the same. So, right, and then Naomi is a human resources manager in the National Health Service, so she does reports, she doesn't write fiction very much. Then there's Isaac. Isaac is doing an MA in philosophy. And I know how he became a philosopher. Do you know the magazine The Beano? It's a comic in Britain. When he was 6 or 7, I wrote an article in a book, someone will remember the book, but anyway, it was edited by Morag Stiles, of what Isaac used to do with the Beano. And you librarians here will be delighted by this. He basically filed them. And he filed them in at least 10 different ways. And he changed the filing systems day by day. So he would stack them on the basis that Dennis the Menace had done one kind of thing, and then he would stack them another way by date, and then suddenly he would reverse it. And so he spent his whole time reading and rereading all his older brother's Beanos and the new Beanos coming in, whilst classifying them at the age of 6 and 7. And he's doing an MA in philosophy, surprise, surprise. But anyway, there you go. And I'm sure it came from that. So, again, I know it's self-congratulatory, but as a parent, I didn't say, chuck out all those dirty Beanos, they're gathering dust under the bed. We said, all right, you've got 25 piles of Beanos now. Interesting. Yeah, it's really good. And I don't regret that for a moment, so there you go. So he's doing philosophy, so he writes philosophy. I don't think he hasn't told me that he writes fictional poetry, but he writes philosophy, I think. And so he's doing a master's. What are you going to be doing when you finish the master's then? Dunno. Anyway, so I don't know. No. Anyway, there you go. Then we come down to Elsie, who does write. Yeah, she writes a lot, but she doesn't have much time to write because she's reading. She stopped talking to us about 3 or 4 months ago because she's busy reading. So she gets up in the morning and reads. And then she comes down for breakfast and we go, hi Elsie. Elsie. She gets herself her breakfast, so she doesn't have to have any conversation about what she wants for breakfast, so she can get on with reading. And then she reads all the way through breakfast and then mutters something to her younger brother to hurry up, because she parents him and says, come on, we've got to get to school, get on. Right, that goes back to the book. And then we talk a bit on the way to school, which is good. I'm glad of that. There's a bit of talk there. And then the moment she walks in through the door, she comes from school, she wants a book, reads. And reads till bedtime. And I've sometimes pathetically go, can I read to you? Any chance I can read to you? I'd like to read a little book to you. And she goes, nope. So I haven't been able to read to her since she was about 7. I think the Greek myths, I think possibly the last thing I did read to her. She's 9 now. And I can't, I try, I wheedle, I do, yeah. And I said, you know, I'm not bad at voices. She said, yeah, I know, that's the trouble. I said, you're reading, the book American, but I'm not bad at American. No, don't do it. Anyway, so, we used to have a relationship, but it's all fallen apart. And it's your lot. It's your fault. All you people believe in books, and she's fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. So she read all 13 volumes of Lemony Snicket in about a day, and in fact we did have a further breakdown in the relationship when she got to volume 12, and volume 13 hardback was out of print in Britain. The paperback hadn't come out yet, and she said, "Where's volume 13, Dad?" And I said, sure, it's in the shops. I showed you. And Isaac, the philosopher, I helped get him a job at Muswell Hill Children's Bookshop. Nepotism. And I said, I'm sure Isaac can get you a copy, you see. He said, nope, it's out of print. Look. He's very good at that, you see, because of the Beano stuff. Like, no, it's out of print. Little sort of horrible bookseller's glee, you know that thing? It's out of print. Don't have to get that money. And I did draw blank, and then, sorry if there's any independent booksellers in the room, but I went to Amazon and they had copies of volume 13 for nothing. I promise you, volume 13 for 0.01p, postage and what have you. So if anybody here sells second-hand books, I'm really sorry, but I sent off volume 13, and as it came through the door, Elsie sort of snatched it as it came through the door, ripped it open and went upstairs, and didn't see her for the rest of the evening. So, so that's Elsie, and she does write at school. She doesn't write oh God, I forgot. The scrapbook. She keeps a calendar where she writes things that happen, and then every so often she has a scrapbook session, and she collects stuff, and then the scrapbook starts, and then she sticks the stuff she's collected, and she's got the date where it says June the 12th went to Carol's or something, and then she's got the bus ticket, so she sticks the bus ticket in, and then she says, I went to Carol's on Thursday, she like that. And because the objects are kind of quite big, the scrapbook is about this thick, and every now and then I say to her, do you need another scrapbook, Else? And she goes, yep. So I then, or if we're out and so on, we buy another scrapbook, and she's got about 13 volumes of these scrapbooks, and there's sort of bits of old sort of cake things in them, you know, there's those little paper things that the cake comes in. What are they called, those things? No, the thing with the cake actually comes in. Yeah, well, those things with the cake still stuck to it, you know, that's gone in, yeah, that's right, and shoelaces of old shoes that she hasn't got anymore. Anyway, they're all in there. Anyway, I think old Tommy Unger would be quite proud of her, but anyway, there you go. So she does, and then last is Emile, and he's named after Zola, so you know expectations are quite high. Is he writing? Yes, he is. In fact, there is severe breakdowns of relationships occur here when Elsie says, I say, okay, we need to go to Sainsbury's, and Emma, my wife, says, we need a list. Elsie says, I'll write a list, and Emile is not in the room. Okay, this is major. Elsie starts writing the list. Emile walks in and says, what are you doing? And Elsie says, I'm writing a list because we're going to Sainsbury's. And then, you know, Where the Wild Things Are, Angry Arthur, combine it all, the house virtually is pulled to pieces. He rages and roars, he feels he's been deprived, his rights, everything, you know, he sends for the shop steward, he sends for the British Army. It's unbelievable because he hasn't been asked to write the list. So now we have terrible trouble because then we pretend that Elsie hasn't started the list, and so we say, we need orange juice. And so he starts to write orange juice, and he gets a bit stuck, but he doesn't want to ask us how to spell it. So then he writes it and he says, "What have I written?" We go, "Potatoes." Anyway, and then when we get to Sainsbury's, Elsie then has to keep her list secret while I'm looking at Emil's list and going, "Right, so we need some..." And then Elsie will whisper, "Orange juice, Dad." And I'll go, "Orange juice, you see?" And he goes, "Yeah." And so Elsie just keeps her list out, and every now and then, just when he's looking the other way, like that, arrows to it. And we've got this list of Emil's, like that. And so, yeah, good. We need some... Yeah, that's it. Lovely, good. We'll get some of those. Lovely, thank you. Look at that.